In small-town South Africa, the first vehicle on the scene of a crime is rarely a police van anymore. It's a private response car. Right now, around 586,000 registered private security officers work across South Africa. SAPS has about 173,000 police. That's nearly 4 private cars for every 1 police officer in the entire country. Think about what that ratio actually means. In the cities, that shows up as armed response signs on every wall. But in rural towns, it's become something much bigger. It's not a supplement to policing out there anymore. In many districts, it has quietly become the primary line of defense. To understand why, you have to go back to 2003, when President Mbeki formally began disbanding the commando system. The commandos were apartheid-era paramilitary rural units. The government scrapped them, promising SAPS-led sector policing would fill the gap. By 2008 the phase-out was complete. The promised replacement never fully materialized the way rural communities were told it would. Today, roughly 40% of police stations in South Africa are understaffed. That's 389 stations out of 975 nationwide. In rural areas, a call to SAPS can mean a 30 to 60-minute wait for a response. Sometimes longer. So communities didn't wait around for the state to catch up. They built their own security infrastructure from scratch. AfriForum's Farm Watch network is the clearest example. In 2012, it was a dozen scattered local groups. Today it's 177 structures across all 9 provinces, running tactical response training, firearms handling, and coordinated drone surveillance. This isn't informal anymore. It's organized, trained, and in places, better equipped than the local police station. There's even a formal bridge between the two worlds. It's called Eyes and Ears, or E2. Coordinated with Business Against Crime South Africa, E2 feeds private surveillance data directly into SAPS situational awareness in rural zones. In other words, the state has started leaning on private security's eyes just to see what's happening in its own countryside. Now let's talk about the technology driving this shift, because it's more advanced than most people realize. At Sobisen Nature Reserve, anti-poaching teams fly DJI Matrice 40 thermal drones every single night. The reserve reports over 600 consecutive days without a poaching loss, and credits the drone program with real arrests. That figure comes from the reserve and the drone vendor, not an independent audit. Worth remembering before you take it as gospel. Still, the technology is spreading fast. Vendors like AI Drones now sell these same thermal systems directly to ordinary farmers. A full Matrice 40 setup runs about $135,000 per unit. That's a serious investment for a family farm. Then there are the dogs. Companies like Afric do Sat K9 and K9 DTC train animals specifically for stock theft and intrusion detection. K9 DTC alone runs around 23 trained dogs across the Lowveld region, all working rural properties. But here's the catch: independent, verified effectiveness data for ordinary farms is thin. Mostly marketing, mostly anecdote. And there's an uglier history attached to all of this. Human Rights Watch has documented rural private security replicating apartheid-era patterns. Protecting the farm owner, while treating farm workers and surrounding black communities as automatic suspects. That tension hasn't gone away. So why is trust in the state collapsing hard enough for private security to fill this much space? It goes deeper than slow response times. In July 2025, KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Lieutenant General Mlendam Gwanotsi dropped a bombshell allegation. He publicly alleged a criminal syndicate had infiltrated SAPS, crime intelligence, the NPA, state security, and even parts of the judiciary. President Ramaphosa responded by establishing a formal commission of inquiry on July 13, 2025. It's chaired by retired Constitutional Court Justice Mbayiseli Madlenga, and hearings began that September. An interim report landed in December 2025. A second interim report in August 2026 confirmed nearly all the original findings. It also flagged the suspected off-the-books crime intelligence operation, one that's still being investigated. This is the real backdrop. It's not just that police are stretched thin. It's that the institution itself is under formal suspicion of rot. When that's the national conversation, a private guard with a working radio starts to look like the more dependable option. Now, this is the part where the story usually gets hijacked by a myth, so let's deal with the numbers directly. Farm murders are real, but statistically tiny. SAPS recorded roughly 36 farm-linked murders out of 19,696 total murders nationwide. That's from April to December 2024. Farm murders made up about 0.2% of all murders in the country. SAPS doesn't even track victim race in these cases. The documented dominant motive, overwhelmingly, is robbery. The Western Cape High Court explicitly rejected white genocide claims as, quote, imagined and not real, citing SAPS data directly. The Institute for Security Studies calls the white genocide framing completely false. Even Genocide Watch's own founder rejected it in writing. So what's actually driving farmers to spend a 135,000 on thermal drones? It's not genocide. It's stock theft. Over 36,000 stock theft cases every year nationally. More than 150,000 animals stolen. Over 200 million lost in a single quarter. And here's the number that should actually alarm you: an estimated 82% of farmers don't even bother reporting livestock theft anymore. They've concluded that calling the police is futile. That's not a fringe opinion. That's the majority. There's a second myth worth dismantling too, and it involves kidnapping and trafficking claims that spread constantly online. SAPS kidnapping cases did rise sharply, from 4,692 in 2014-15 to 17,061 in 2023-24. That's a 264% increase, and it's real. But an ISS analysis of over 3,000 actual case dockets found under 1% were linked to human trafficking. The largest category, about 46%, were express kidnappings, victims briefly held during a hijacking or armed robbery. Roughly 27% were linked to sexual offenses. A meaningful share were custody disputes between parents. Viral claims about a child trafficked every 30 seconds, or 1 million children trafficked a year, have been fully debunked by Africa Check. Actual government-detected child trafficking cases number in the dozens over multiple years. Not millions. Not even close. The real trafficking crisis in South Africa is labor trafficking, bakkie broker recruiters trapping migrant workers in debt bondage. Workers from Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Lesotho, and Eswatini get trapped on farms, construction sites, and in domestic work. The U.S. State Department downgraded South Africa to Tier 2 watch list in 2025, citing collapsed anti-trafficking funding, not runaway crime scale. There is no credible evidence linking farm-attack robbery syndicates to child trafficking rings. These are separate, distinct crime categories. So if the fear driving private security's rise isn't genocide or mass trafficking, what happens when armed guards operate almost entirely on their own? Legally, private security officers have no more power than any ordinary citizen. They can only make a citizen's arrest. That arrest has to be for an offense committed in their presence, and the suspect must then be handed to SAPS. Courts apply a strict test, unlawful and imminent attack, necessity, proportionality, to separate lawful defense from vigilantism. But a ground-up investigation found roughly 240 criminal cases and 771 unresolved complaints against the private security industry. There is no public data available on shootings or injuries caused by private security officers. None. That gap is enormous. In 2025, SIRA proposed tightening rules on where and how armed private officers can operate. The DA and industry bodies push back hard, calling the changes overly restrictive on an industry rural towns now depend on. So picture the actual shape of rural South Africa right now. Understaffed stations. A police service under formal corruption inquiry. An 82% non-reporting rate on stock theft because nobody believes it's worth the call anymore. And filling the vacuum, an industry 3 to 4 times larger than the police, armed, largely unaudited, and growing. This isn't a temporary gap being patched while the state catches up. In many towns, this has become the permanent arrangement. The question isn't whether private security is here to stay in rural South Africa. It clearly is. The question is who's watching it. This story of who really protects rural South Africa deserves your attention, so hit like and subscribe to Media Kitchen SA for more.